Yes, I know that it stands to reason that if this person fell at Waterloo he was a fighter, but I'm talking about a nationally known bare-knuckle prize fighter who was the darling of the officer wagering classes. This is the story of John Jack Shaw, who was born in Nottinghamshire. He was a sickly child, so his father, who was a farmer, allocated a particular cow to the lad and issued him with a tin mug so he could go to the cow and drink milk whenever the fancy took him. All that calcium worked, since he grew up strong, growing to be the tallest and strongest young lad for miles around. All that muscle went to his head, since he became a school bully, being described as naturally of a pugnacious disposition. His father forked out for an apprenticeship with a joiner and wheelwright, but the excellent opportunity afforded to him was wasted, since the scrapes he got into with other lads caused words between him and his master, until at last his indentures were given up and he returned home. One can imagine the discussion between father and son on his return. He had to make his way somehow, and his reputation for being a stroppy type was preceding, so it must have been hard to find work. Eventually, he found some employment repairing gates and fences and doing rough carpentry work, at least using some of the rudimentary skills picked up during his short apprenticeship. Making use of his size and strength, he began to engage in prize fights. It was at one of these in 1805 that he was seen by the national champion, Jem Belcher. Shaw was on his way to losing the bout when Belcher called out, "Youngster, do not give in. Fight slow and careful, and you are sure to lick him, as my name is Jim Belcher." The name was well enough known to give Shaw a new confidence, and he went on to win the bout. His story took a new direction when he went to Nottingham Goose Fair on the 16th of October 1807. Prize fighting was a popular pastime at that time, and there would have been a number of rings where Shaw could go and literally pick a fight. It was there he took the King's shilling, enlisting with the 2nd Lifeguards on the same day. Military records show that he was 6 foot tall and nearly 15 stones. Shaw's evident propensity for fighting and his physique caused officers to encourage him in the noble art of boxing, to sponsor him at spars at 5 courts in Little St. Martin Street. His successes there led on to attendances at Jackson's Rooms in London, run by gentleman John Jackson, who was at the time champion of all England. There, Shaw assumed the sobriquet of the Milling Lifeguardsman, and in subsequent bouts twice defeated Tom the Moor Molyneux. And on the 12th of July 1812, in his first official fight, defeated William Bill Burroughs. He was now a contender for the English championship. But King George had other ideas, and Shaw was packed off on the 27th of October 1812 for service in the Peninsular War. He was promoted to Corporal of Horse. This has the equivalent of a rank of sergeant outside the Household Division. Heavy cavalry was not much used in the Peninsula, and so he came through the Peninsular War and became orderly to Lieutenant Colonel William Ponsonby, going on with Ponsonby to Paris in preparation for the Congress of Vienna. Shaw came back to England and continued with his boxing career, beating Edward Ned Painter, after which Shaw issued a challenge to all comers for the championship of all England. The boxing cognoscenti were looking forward to a scrap between Shaw and Tom Cribb. Napoleon's return from Elba in 1815 put paid to all of his plans, and Shaw came back into the army as a corporal in the 2nd Lifeguards under Lord Uxbridge. There is a story that just before the battle Shaw was seen to go on to get the brigade's rum ration and help himself freely thereto, such that he fell off his horse at one point. However, Come the time for the start of the battle, he was there, to be stationed in the rear of the British centre in the 2nd Lifeguards, along with the 1st Lifeguards, the Royal Regiment of Horse Guards, and the 1st King's Dragoon Guards. To his left was another heavy brigade, consisting of the 1st Royal Dragoons, 2nd Royal North British Dragoons, the Scots Greys, and the 6th Dragoons, those that are Enniskillings. On the order of the Earl of Uxbridge, the 2 heavy brigades attacked the French in support of Picton's infantry. The 1st and 2nd Lifeguards smashed into the Cuirassiers, and one of them challenged Jack to single combat. He should have thought better of it, as Jack cleaved off the front of his face like a piece of an apple. His brute power, backing up a honed skill with a sabre, was serving him well. 8 more Cuirassiers sought to avenge their comrade, but suffered a similar fate. Jack's blood was up. The flow of the battle took them all towards the French infantry, and Jack in the process dispatched a man in a French cuirassier's uniform, but who challenged him in an Irish accent. Jack became surrounded, and his luck finally gave out when his sabre snapped. For a while he fought on, using his helmet to belabour his attackers, but was eventually brought down by a pistol shot. Later in the day, he was seen to crawl to the wall of Haye Sainte, joining one of his comrades who was also wounded. His last words were, "Ah, my dear fellow, I'm done for." The next morning, he was found propped against the wall, dead. He was buried by his comrades outside the walls of Haye Sainte. After his death, due to his celebrity as a prize fighter and his exploits during the battle, Jack became famous as one of the heroes of Waterloo. There is one final twist to the tale. His body was exhumed some years later. There is some dispute as to who actually did it, the candidates being either the poet Sir Walter Scott, who had become obsessed with Jack's story, or it may have been Admiral Sir Alfred Ryder. Well, however it may have arrived, Shaw's skull was recorded as being an exhibit of the Royal United Services Institution, labelled Skull of John Shaw, the famed lifeguardsman who fell at Waterloo, procured by the late Admiral Ryder. It was given later to the keeping of a private gentleman's club, which, on moving premises in 1898, had some qualms over having possession of the skull of a fallen British soldier. The curator therefore wrote to the incumbent of Cossall Church, where Shaw was born, requesting its interment in a suitable place. It can be said, then, that John Shaw, or at least part of him, unlike most of his countrymen who died at Waterloo, was in due course finally laid to rest in his native soil, since on the 21st of June 1898 his skull was buried in St Leonard's Church, Woollerton, close to the pillar near the font.